Hi everybody, it's Christine at CLAldridgeArt, and I am so excited to be back for another installment of coloring in my new book, Fabulous Flowers. And I am currently in the middle of reading a new book. This is another one of the stack that I did rescue from the dollar store, another 50-center. And it's called Mercy Snow, a novel. It is by author Tiffany Baker, who wrote two other books, The Little Giant of Aberdeen County and The Gilly Salt Sisters, both of which are supposedly wonderful, according to all of this. I've only just started it, and what I really wanted to say is that one of the things that I enjoy most about a writer is their ability to flesh out a character completely, and this author seems to be able to do that. And the story is very, very interesting. So, you know, I'm not going to give any spoilers away. I'll just say there's an accident. Only, is it an accident? A bunch of people die. Was it intentional? We don't really know yet. But it's a very interesting read, and so I'm going to recommend Mercy Snow, a novel. It's not new. It was written, I believe, in 2014, but it's really good. So, and now on to this. As you know, or maybe you don't know, but if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I've had an eventful few days, and they have been full of generosity and magic and just amazement at the generosity of the coloring community. And so I thought I would pay you back a little bit by actually doing some real work. And so this is a picture that we based with Caran NEOCOLor IIs. We use that as a base color, and we are going over it with the Prismacolors and pencils. And this is the picture. It is from my latest book, and I've so far, I have only, of course, this is my art, I drew it. There is a flip through of this book, both a short one set to music, where it just sort of flips the pages and shows you what's in the book, and then also a longer one where I actually flip through and talk about each image. Those are in my playlist. I will put a link down there at the bottom for you, or maybe up there at the top. And so look for that little flashing eye. I think I might have learned how to use that. Anne at A Colorful Life colored a version of this that just knocked my socks off. So look for, I think it's Anne's Blissful Life on Instagram, and you will see it. And let's get started. So we left this with only having done just a very few of the areas, and in order to save time, yours particularly, I thought that I would go ahead and color on it off camera and figure out the things that I wanted to do. So I gave a brief preview of it just the other day, but what I've done is trying to zoom in here. Make sure I stay in some sort of focus. That looks pretty good for now. And so what I've done is I've used just a single color of Prisma. Well, actually, I can't really say that's true. Let me pull these. Now, I am lucky enough to have received a full set of Prismacolors, the whole 150. This is the 72 set. And, but since we started this with these, I wanted to go ahead and continue it with the 72 set, so that I don't end up with colors that aren't supposed to be in the set or in the picture that we're working on. And so this I did with just true blue. And so I wanted to make it look like satin ribbon. So everything is, I'm going for everything with a shine. The gemstones have a shine, the metal has a shine, and of course the satin ribbon has a shine. And this is really easy to achieve just simply by coloring from the outside toward the center and just leaving your light. And we'll demonstrate how that works over here. Now, one of the things that I am most proud of, and I do want to see if I can get it to show up for you, is the way that this turquoise gem right here turned out. Now, I think that the camera is going to wash this color out, but it is so pretty. And it is the aqua, I want to say it's the aquamarine and the light aqua. So that is, and then it's got some darker blue around the edge to just sort of pop it out. And I did do both of them on this side, but hopefully in this this section I'm going to be able to do, my goal is we're going to do this whole section so you can see how all of that works. There's at any rate, we'll go from there. I'll show you how I did it. Okay, let me see if I can move this just a little up so that I don't have to actually put the book in my lap in order to keep it on camera. All right, that looks pretty good. And we'll start, I think we'll start with this. I've really been itching to do that one to see if I couldn't get it to turn out like the other one. Okay. And how is everyone tonight? It is 4:31 in the morning on Tuesday. What I'm doing is I'm just starting out very lightly, very lightly along the edges. And I just want to work my way in to leaving that little narrow highlighted space. And that, you know, of course, it's all been based with the NEOCOLORs. And it has been just a heck of a few days. And so I'm sorry that I didn't get back to this before now. My fans over on my Facebook group are really kind of wondering where the heck I've been. Because it's a surefire bet that I have not been in the group. And my hat's off to the folks like Sammy and Ann. Well, even Ann finally stepped back from her Facebook group. I don't want to do that because that is where I got my start. And I love those folks over there. I've been trying to get them to come over here, But it seems that in the world of social media, it's mostly one or the other. And I understand that because people do have limited amounts of time to devote to things that are not their families and their to living their lives, work schedules, and all that kind of good stuff. So just very lightly, and then I'll go over that with the lighter shade just because it blends it a little bit into the tooth. I don't want to crush the tooth yet, well, I don't want to crush the tooth at all, but I do want to sort of get the pigment to spread out. And you can do that with just very, 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 very lightly. There, and hold the pencil, back here so that you can be light. And you can very literally just add layer after layer until the page is saturated, or just this side of saturated. Actually, I am going to mess around with the light just a tiny bit and see if I can't adjust the gain down to show the color. And so I've really been enjoying watching the streams and making my own videos. To those of you who have joined me in my glee and my humor and my gratitude, thank you. If you want to see me just absolutely lose it, just absolutely lose it hysterically, check out my last video, which is it's day 4 of Happy Mail, and I had an episode where something just struck me funny, and I just could not. It still gives me the giggles. It still just gives me the giggles. And so this is technically what, 4 layers, but you really the best way to get a richness of color, you would think that it would be to put down the most pigment, but it's not, because it does look different. It also is a lot more prone to wax bloom if you put a lot of pigment on the page all at once. And so if you want to blend colors subtly, a light hand is really your best friend. It's also one of those techniques that once you master, it works in all kinds of ways and places in your coloring that you otherwise wouldn't expect. It really helps me, with being able to use water mediums on Create Space paper, because I don't, my touch on the paper is very gentle with the water brushes, and that way it doesn't pill up. I apologize for the gulping sound, everybody. So I mean, when you get here to the center, you are really just sort of hit or miss making that highlight, because you don't want to lose it all together. And it does take a while. Deb is I've been watching, by the way, did everybody see Deb's live streams? He live streamed on Friday, finally, and I missed it, but I caught one, I want to say, was it Sunday? Yes, no, it was Monday. It was today. And it was, because it happened in the afternoon here. I have no idea. What day is it? It is the 4th. And the 4th makes it what, Tuesday? Yes, Tuesday, December 4th. Okay. You know you're in trouble when you have to consult your phone to find out what day it is. It was Monday, Monday the 3rd, and it would have been after work UK time. So, and here in the USA, we're the East Coast is 5 hours earlier, and of course the West Coast is 8 hours earlier from UK time. But it was fun. He did a flip through of some really good books. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Excuse me. If you get a chance. Now, I had kept hearing the name Ticket to Dreams for a book, that had come out. But I really wasn't familiar with the artist. And Chris Chang's channel popped up with a new flip through of a book called Imaginary Friends. And it's a new book by the same artist. And so I just, thought, well, I'll watch it because I like Chris's taste in books. And I was blown away, absolutely blown away by the art. Some people say it's depressing. I don't think it's depressing at all. It's the big-eyed girl art, but there's something really expressive about it, and the variety in the book is expressive as well. The artist is making a statement, and the art is beautiful, and it will color up beautifully. I can hardly wait to see some of you guys who are really skilled at the art of coloring tackle some of those images. Now, I didn't like Ticket to Dreams very much, but I like the new book. I like that new book. Karolina Kublakowski, something like that. At any rate, if you go to Chris Chang's channel, and you'll see that link, and watch that video. She's got links to her Etsy shop, to Karolina's Etsy shop. So I strongly urge all of you to check that book out. It may not be for you, but I loved it. I favorited it, and I don't favorite very many things on Etsy, except my own stuff. And even then, it won't let me favorite my own stuff. So. And, okay. And the other one that I absolutely adore, that I also saw a flip-through on today, was Tatiana Bogima's, it's her vintage classics. It's before she started doing the hang on a second because my brain is like not functioning. Okay, now I'm using just a powder blue, which has got virtually no color. At least to me it has no color. It's certainly got a color. But if you see how then if you use it very lightly as a blender, it really makes that turquoise in the aquamarine pop up. But it's beautiful classic art. Classic art. To me, it's very reminiscent of the old Victorian style, which I think it's supposed to be. But it's always been a style that appeals to me. And just like magic, now the final touch is to get a dark blue. In this case, I'm going to stick with the sort of watery feel of turquoise colors, and I'm going to use this 902, which is the ultramarine. And I'm just going to come down, and I'm using actually quite a bit of pressure, and just tracing this outer line to darken it up. And you see how that makes it pop. Once again, you're just creating the illusion of depth with color by darkening up those outer edges, because you'd think that as the stone meets the bezel, the bezel casts a little bit of a shadow onto the stone. And so that is one way to think of that. And then you can soften that up with that light blue. I love this light blue because and it wouldn't matter if you used the light blue or the white. I just like the light blue on blue because you always want to try and keep your tones. And I completely lost my train of thought. But, okay, whoops. Now I can tell that I do need to darken up because I've lost a little bit of my lightness of my highlight. So now I'm going to find a clean spot on my eraser. If you ever need to, I like this kind of an eraser. I've had this now for so long that the name of it is worn off, but it's an eraser that's got refills. I use it a lot in my drawing because I got tired of. I like to color with these mechanical pens or draw with these mechanical pencils, the cheap ones, but the erasers always break off. So I bought this, which is nothing but eraser. So I'm just cleaning off the eraser and sort of squaring it off a little bit so that I can get a bit of a corner. And then hopefully I can use that to just take off the tiniest bit of that highlight, or of that, where I covered up that highlight. And then I'll go lightly in with the dark. and just sort of define it, and then go a little bit more, little tiny bit more pressure with the lighter color to really make it stand out. So now I'm thinking that I'm probably going to end up working that a little bit more, but let's leave it alone for right this very second. Okay, so now I know that some of you are probably anxious for me to get back to this story, and I'm trying to remember where I left off. And I believe that if you are joining us for the first time, I talk a bit about my life in these videos, and I was telling everybody about how I discovered my mother's family, because I grew up not knowing who they were, and didn't find out until after she passed away. So, I'm trying to remember where I left you. I think I left you where we had, this is just true blue. You know, the true blue. And I'm just laying down a very thin layer of this, and we are going to switch, we're going to switch back and forth between a lot of blues for this. So we had met the first time in person, and I had not, at the time, he thought he was my uncle. I kind of suspected that he was my brother, and we left it there, and then I told him about my suspicions in a phone call a couple of years later. And he also thought that possibility that he was my mother's child and not her brother was feasible. And you know, that's when I think about that, that is just a huge step for somebody to take mentally. You know, that the way that they grew up, or the way that they were treated in their lives, might have been affected by something like, you know, the fact that you had a mother that you never knew. Now, I know where I left off. I know where I left off. Okay. Apparently, now this all happened when my mother would have been, as nearly as I can figure, well, I actually know the exact dates, but would have been about 17, maybe just coming on 18, when Dawn was born. Now, I had, of course, over the years and many pieces of let slip information that I had gathered, knew that my mother had 2 sisters, but I certainly had never heard about a baby brother. And then why would there be a picture of a baby brother she might never have known? Because if she left home at 17, which I know she did, and never supposedly went back, why would she even know about him? I mean, other than academically. And why would they be close enough that she would keep a picture like that of him and his and her mother or his mother on her, in her nightstand drawer? So after, we certainly thought that made a lot of sense, and so it had to have been a couple of years later. Maybe it wasn't even a couple of years later. Maybe it was just a few months later. No, it had to have been a couple of years. At any rate, by the time that I discovered he existed, he has 3 children, all of whom were in the service. At the time, 2 of them were in the Coast Guard, and 1 was in the Air Force. And then the oldest one, when he was done with his Coast Guard service, joined the Navy. So, talk about service-minded. Now, I've never met, well, actually, that's not true. I did meet him, I believe, because the next time that my brother Don and I met in person was at the marriage of his eldest daughter, who would be either my niece or my cousin, one way or the other. And I went up to Big Sky Country to attend the wedding. And it was a lovely time. They are, by the way, that was many years ago, they are still married. And I am in superficial contact with them. And they don't live very far away. So, that is kind of nice. They just recently moved to the east coast of the USA, just a couple of states down. So, certainly closer than how far away they were. But at any rate, back to the story. So, Dawn and I decided that would be a perfect opportunity for us to do some investigation together, to see if we couldn't figure out some sort of evidence for this, wild speculation that we both had based upon, what truly was the flimsiest of evidence. So, and I apologize that I am excuse me, everybody, coloring this so slowly. But I'm trying to both think and work at the same time. And I do have I've got a lot of thoughts. My internal editor is on. My keep the story going is on. I've got a lot of processes working in my head all at the same time. And so at any rate, right now I'm adding a little bit of peacock blue just as an undertone, not even so that it shows up, just because it makes the blues richer. If you add a variety of blues in, and see how I'm working that sheen, because I want it to be a sheen like fabric. So not a highlight like a stone, but a true sheen where it just keeps getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and I'm trying to maintain the curve of what I drew. Okay, so now he and I decided to set off on this adventure. So one of the first places that we started was the Hall of Records. And we wanted to get a copy of the original birth certificates of everybody involved. And to see if there had been any alterations made. Because the birth certificate that he went into the military with listed the woman that he grew up believing to be his mother as his mother, and his father as his father. You know, the people that he grew up believing to be his parents were named on his birth certificate. But we wanted to find out if there was any record of a reissue of a birth certificate, or any, you know, a church record or a birth record that might have different information on it. And what we found was really interesting, because the registrar of nurses, or the registrar of the state, was an older woman who, when she found out that my maternal grandmother was a nurse at a maternity hospital, said, oh, that kind of thing went on all the time. You know, where a child would be born of a daughter of the family, and her mother would be named the mother of the child. And it was, of course, done for two reasons. One, to preserve the family's reputation, and the other, so that the child would be raised in the family to which it belonged, regardless of who its mother was. So, so she said it's very possible that the original birth record was, I guess, in a sense, falsified. All you'd need is a cooperating doctor. I mean, they keep the birth records right there at the hospital, blank ones, and my grandmother would have been an employee there. So that was really interesting. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to Copenhagen Blue. And the Copenhagen Blue is number 906. And I think I'm getting a little sinusy, and I apologize. The weather is changing, and it always affects my sinuses. On the one hand, it was interesting to learn that, but on the other hand, it was frustrating, because, you know, it kind of meant, well, it was a dead end, as far as, you know, as far as any kind of proofs go. So then we went looking, because every family, of course, has a black sheep, and my mother's youngest sister, now, my mother would have been, at the time that her youngest sister, whose name I already identified as Lois, was born, my mother would have been about, I want to say she would have been about 10. And that's, yeah, that was why, yeah, because Lois was 6 years younger than her. So she would have been about 6. Sorry. And so 6 when Lois was born. My mother was ultimately, we found out, was the second child of that family, but Lois would have been born when she was 6. And then Dawn would have been born 10 years later. Now the math doesn't work out right on that. I had it at one point. So my mother must have been 7 or 8. Yeah, 7, maybe 7 going on 8 at any rate, when Lois was born. And so they would have grown up together just a little bit. But Lois married and had several children as well. One of those children was put in charge of all of my maternal grandmother's papers, diaries, letters, all that kind of stuff. So Dawn and I traveled to her house. Now, as it happened, she was considered the loose cannon of the family. And the one most likely to help us uncover an unpleasant truth, or or in better words, excavate the skeleton out of the closet, please. And she was perfectly happy to try and do that, except that somebody got to her first. And so by the time that we actually got to there, stuff couldn't be found, or there wasn't anything worthwhile there, or whatever the story was. We Dawn and I sort of looked at each other and went, yeah, right. But once again, you cannot force people to tell you things that they don't want to know, or that they don't want to tell you. And ultimately, we finally figured out that there must be an underlying, there must be something more to the story. There's got to be something more to this story, because times have changed. People, all the people who would be embarrassed by it are gone. The rest of us just want to know what the case is. We want to know our history. Well, as it turns out, that was true. There was sort of a deeper underlying truth there. And whatever it was, I will give you this spoiler. We never found out for a fact what it is. But we did develop a whole lot of, I guess you'd call it working theories. So I'm back to this book, and you can see I'm just very, very lightly, once again, just whispering across the page. Now I'm going to do the lighter blue, the lightest blue, and sort of blend a little bit. Once again, I'm still just really, really light. Now I'm going to do one last layer of the Copenhagen Blue. Darken up this side, closest to the edges. Y'all are going to call me the queen of the cliffhangers. Okay, so back to the story. All right, down to the sides. Hang on. Back to the true blue. See how that, when you are able to, because what you've done is you've built up enough pigment on the page to where the pigments that as you're putting down the darker pigments, they slide and blend on top of all the other wax. So that is the reason why layering works. Layering works for blending because you are literally creating a slide. You know, you're creating a surface for your pigments to slide around on. So back to Don and the way that he felt growing up. One of the very, very first things when he said that would explain a lot, when I, said, I think you're my brother, and he said that would explain a lot. One of the very first things he told me was that would explain why my mother, who I thought he had never met, was his favorite sister. And I was like, what? You knew my mother? And he's like, oh yeah. He said, I was really little. I was like, maybe 4 or 5 years old. But yes, I remember that she came and she visited, and I absolutely adored her. Absolutely adored her. And I never forgot her, is what he told me. And yeah, I was like, wow. Okay, so now, of course, it's several years later. And I asked him, I said, well, was there anybody else that you felt that way about? And he said, I've been thinking about it. And yes, I felt that way about my uncle. Or, yeah, was it his uncle? Yeah, I think it was his uncle. He felt that way about his uncle, and his cousin was his very, very best friend in the world. They did everything together. They went everywhere together, la-da-da-da. The relationship there isn't quite right. I'll figure out what's wrong with it. But at any rate, now I have to kind of go backwards in this story because otherwise the context of it won't be clear. My mother was born of a different father than the one that she grew up with. Apparently, her mother was married early on. She was of good German stock that came from Iowa or Illinois or one of those states, where they grow corn and and all of that. And she had married a infamous young man from a Kentucky family. And all we really know about him is his name. His first name was Jack. And so it's his name that appears on my mother's birth certificate. And what happened to Jack, we don't know. And we've never really been able to find out at all, because this is, as a fairly infamous family, it is also a huge genealogy of that particular last name. And and both my cousins, who will come into this in another installment, not this installment, but in another installment, and are somewhat expert at tracking genealogy, have never been able to separate this guy from the rest of the family, to figure out quite what branch of the family he came from, or where it went, or where, what happened to him, that kind of thing. Alright, so now I'm sort of blending and leaving that, and I'm looking at this from a somewhat oblique angle, guys, so if I don't get it just right, I'll just work on it a little more off camera. But you can see how it's done. That's what I wanted you to get out of this, to see how it's done. And you just keep working it until you get it the way you want it. Now this is, oops, not the one I want. Now I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go to the Indigo Blue, which is the 901. So, my mother's mother eventually, or not eventually, but by this gentleman, by this Kentucky guy, she had 2 daughters. And my mother was the second one. And whether or not there is apparently a divorce record. So we do know that he didn't die. They were in fact divorced. But once again, the times were different. There was nobody to enforce at the time. Women had a lot less rights. If a father didn't support his family, there wasn't really much that a mother could do to enforce that. So apparently this guy was a deadbeat, and which of course could explain why none of us have wasted much effort in trying to find him. But she was left on really, really hard times. And not only that, but because of malnutrition, my mother was sick. She had a condition called rickets. And so in order to survive, my grandmother had to give her oldest daughter away to another family to raise so that she could eat. But they wouldn't take my mother because she was sick. And so Grace apparently then remarried. And the people, it should be said at this point in time, that the people who took, who adopted the older sister were friends of hers. And they did stay in touch. And the girls were raised together as best friends. Or at least friends. Whether or not it was all the time friends or summertime friends or what, I'm not entirely clear on, but they did know one another. And they did grow up having a relationship. So, and the people who took her were good people. Were really good people. And they actually come back into my story. So I guess this was a really long way of saying that the woman, or the man that I always thought of as, or, you know, that I can't say, that the woman that, or the man that raised my mother as her father was actually her stepfather. So that was a really long way of getting there. But lays a foundation for something else. All right. And apparently, the guy that Don felt was more like a father to him than his own father was this guy's brother. And, you know, the stepfather's brother. And and his widow was still alive. And we sought the advice of and were asked to not ask her any questions. And of course we honored that wish. If there was a secret there, that secret could possibly hurt her, and that would never have settled well with either one of us. And so we left that alone, but that didn't mean that we stopped speculating about it, believe me. Hang on a second, guys. I need to take a very quick break. And we are back. Okay, so one of the few things that I knew about my mother was that she was a really good cook. And one of the few things that I knew is that her stepfather was the one who had taught her to cook. Okay, so now I'm going to change it up a little. I'm going to start out with Copenhagen Blue down here, and we're just going to do the same thing on this one that we did on the other one. And as it turns out, he had apparently, that's how he had made his living. He had been a cook in the service during the war years, and he was a cook in real life for a job. And, you know, he would, whether it was restaurants or mining camps or, you know, the timber camps, because, you know, timber is mined, technically, or timber is grown and then harvested, sorry. Sorry, lumber camps. And one of the things that the family, during the years that my mother grew up in it, used to do was go to Idaho and spend their summers in Idaho with his brother and his brother's family and all of that. There was a lumber camp there, and or something along those lines, and they used to do that in the summertime. And he had a son who was just about my mother's age. And we strongly suspect that he is possibly Dawn's actual biological father. So keeping it in the family, certainly. So not the uncle. Oh, jeez. How would I do that? That he would be the step. Okay, who would he have been to my mother? If the dad would have been, okay, the brother would have been my mother's uncle by marriage. And his son would have been her cousin by marriage. There you go. So her cousin, but only by marriage, was about her age. And he's the one that Dawn grew up feeling was more like a father to him than his own dad was. And that was, that was not based upon, I guess it was based upon both the way he was treated by this guy, and there really is an instinctual thing that human beings have toward recognizing their own. It's why a mother can recognize a child that she hasn't seen for years, or maybe gave up, or something like that. It's an instinctual baseline human thing. And Dawn felt it for both my mother and this guy. And I think his nickname was Buddy. So we'll go with Buddy. Yeah, that way we'll protect the innocent and go with the possibly innocent and go with Buddy. So apparently Buddy and my mother grew up together, and we think that he might, in fact, be Dawn's actual biological father. Because it was shortly after Dawn was born that Buddy got married and had his family, started his own family. And it was that son, that first son that was born, that was was Dawn's best friend, my brother's best friend. So, technically they would have been, if our story is correct, it would have been his brother, his half brother. And that made a ton of sense to certainly to Dawn. It also made a ton of sense to me, and it would explain, a bunch of things, like, why my mother left, or maybe not why she left, but I'm pretty sure that she was told by her own mother to leave, and maybe to, I don't know, go out and make a happy life or whatever, but and that they would keep the child, and she could go have a life and not have to, be burdened with a baby at age 17. Whatever the story was, it ultimately affected both Dawn and I by the emotional way that it was conducted. That it changed the way, certainly the way he was treated in the family, and it denied me a big brother. But at any rate, apparently my mother did go back, and this is when Dawn met her. This is the only time he ever met her. When he was about, he said he thought he was about 4 or 5, and as nearly as we can figure, there would not have been any legal way that my mother could take him, because his birth certificate indicated that he was her brother. And why would, she wouldn't be able to sue without, and like I say, the times were completely different. It's not like today where, we would all move heaven and earth to, plus she was young, she was unsettled, by that particular time, well, actually, I don't really know. I do know that she cooked in, logging camps, and she did things like that, and because it would be a few years before she quite literally joined the Foreign Service, which is ultimately the diplomatic corps of the United States. But they have a lot of administrative personnel. And one of the most interesting places that she ended up stationed was in Kodiak, Alaska. And there was some sort of a program there that administered because Alaska was a territory of the United States long before it became a state. Excuse me. I don't remember if it was Alaska or Hawaii or both that were admitted to the Union. I want to say it was 1959, but it might have been sooner or earlier than that. I'd have to look it up. That were the last, because originally it was the 48 states, 48 contiguous states, and then Alaska and Hawaii were added later. And so at any rate, she was in Alaska, and she had also been in Oregon. She had married, but this was all stuff that I would learn later. I didn't know it, I certainly didn't know any of this at this particular time. So Dawn and I figured that we had learned pretty much as we were going to learn on this trip. And, we got to know each other a little bit. We took an actual pleasure part of the trip and went out to he drove me out to the Beartooth Mountain Range, which is a really rocky, craggy mountain range, but absolutely beautiful. And just sort of generally spent some time together, and it was a really lovely time. And this goes to something that I said in a couple of videos ago. There is a lot to be said for growing up together. That is the thing, I think, that really glues sibling relationships together. And if you don't have those sort of shared experiences, shared memories of mom and dad, or Christmases, or good times, bad times, whatever they are, that cause siblings to cling to each other, we did not have that. And so we really found that there just wasn't, we didn't really have just a lot in common. He was, you know, he was sort of faith-based, and I was not. He was obviously very, very much a family man. He was a technical wizard, you know, with all of the techie stuff, and worked for government in one way or another all of his life. But we just didn't have that thing that holds siblings together. And so we did lose track of one another for a number of years. And then Facebook happened. And I, one day, was trolling around. And, well, actually, yeah, I was sort of trolling around. And I found his, I would look for them occasionally. You know, run the names, the family names, check out the pictures to see if it was them, that kind of thing. But I didn't really see them. And then one day his wife had a Facebook page. And so I friended her, and she, or yeah, I don't remember if I sent her a message or if I friended her or what, but the next thing you know, Dawn and I were talking on the phone again, and that was so lovely. That was really just a few years ago at this point, after he had retired, and they had sold their property, because they had horse property, and had moved to be nearer to their eldest daughter in California, who by that time she spent 20 years in the Air Force, and her husband also was career Air Force. And see, I love that. I love service people, you know, people who work for the country, who patriotism. It's I just love that. I'm very proud of the fact that I come from a family of service that way. Obviously my grandfather on my dad's side, and actually on both sides, were in World War I. And my dad fought in World War II in Korea. Don was in Vietnam, and his kids, thankfully, well, unless you count that mess we got into over in Kuwait, did not have to serve during wartime, although my nephew, the one who I've only met once, Don's oldest son, is actually still in the Navy, so I'm assuming that we are certainly not in a time of world peace right now, although we have no threats knocking on our own door. But whatever it is he does, I don't know anything about it, and nobody talks about it, so. So there's that. But it was lovely to start up our conversations again 15, 20 years later, and and catch up. And you know, I am certainly much more mature to the ways of the world than I was, you know, in my late 20s and very early 30s. And of course, I learned a lot about people and their motivations and the way things work and all of that. And part of me sort of knew that we were making up for lost time with him being so sick. And I was really, really, really happy to do that, because it came at the perfect time for me, which is the lead-in, literally, to the next part of my story. The timing of the universe to deliver, to open windows before they close a door. It's true. The universe does that. Some people call them miracles. Some people call them karma. I just simply call them wondrous and amazing, and I don't need to understand them. I just know that they exist. And with that, I'm going to stop talking about this. We will have another part of the story where you may just learn a little more, and I may just learn a little more about that missing sister. And that is interesting. I think I had mentioned that my dad and my uncle, his sister's wife, my aunt, and I think in that other video I had said something about my aunt being my father's mother. No, she was my father's sister. My paternal grandmother and grandfather had 2 children, my dad and his sister. And she passed away in 2008. And anyway, this one is not coming as easily as that last one. I'm having a tough time with this one. Just, if that happens to you, you just keep working it. Erase it if you have to. I mean, absolutely erase it if you have to. But if you mess something up, you do need to know it's gotten better in just the last couple seconds. You do need to know that the eraser will leave a layer of wax. It will be much easier to blend the next, if you erase it and do it again. But you have to be aware of that your paper won't actually hold the color. You have to color more carefully because there's already wax on the paper. But I think I pulled this off. Geez, so all I managed to do in 45 minutes is one gem And these three things, oh, surely we can do one more. Yeah, we'll do one more. Because I want to try and keep these videos to an hour. Plus, it is 5:50 and it is Tuesday morning. So, May is going to stream, and I am one of her mods. So, I like to support her wonderful channel. By the way, if you do watch this video, and you are not familiar with May Brox's channel, then come on over. It is May, new word, Brox. And she is wonderful with watercolors, ink tints, pencils. She's got a long background in coloring. She's a lot of fun to watch and to talk to and to be around. And her streams can be a lot of fun. And she's in Norway. So I get to tell when I walk to the store here, very often I pass the house of this lovely little old lady. Her name is Alice. And, I mean, I at not quite 60, I am not old. She's old. Alice is old. Alice and Fred. And so I have a lot of fun telling her that I was coloring with my friend in Norway this morning. She just thinks that's wondrous. And, okay. So that was the Copenhagen Blue. I love that Copenhagen Blue. And, oh, now that Kenny is so generous, Kenny K, and has sent me a beautiful set of the full set of the 150 Prismacolors. And there are so many gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous blues in there. And so I'm looking forward to learning them and figuring out what's in that set. Okay, now I'm going to darken this just a tiny bit. And I still haven't done the, the dark outlines on these. Sorry, I'm being a little scattered here. But wouldn't it be cool? Because I really wish there was some way that we could, even though Dawn even is gone now, I think it would be so cool to find out if Buddy really was his dad. I guess we'll never know, but well, he probably knows, because now if there is an afterlife, they're talking about it. On the day that Dawn passed away, I wrote on my Facebook page that my brother had passed away, and I really didn't know how to handle it, but that I hoped that wherever he was giving my mother the what for. Yeah. So yeah, at any rate, so that was the thing, and why I think my mother said, when I was born, and this woman, I shouldn't call her this woman. She probably did the best she could with a difficult circumstance. My grandmother, how about that? My grandmother. Why my mother said that to her. about not getting your hands on another one. I'm guessing that once she got a hold of Dawn, she wouldn't get back. So, because I know my mother went back for him. Or at least that's what we believe. We believe that, and Don believed it because he thought that that might be the reason why the memory stood out in his brain, even though he was so young when it happened. You know, and usually memories don't hang on like that unless they're attached to some kind of a traumatic event. And here's a perfect example of that. They say that the basis of our personalities are formed based around events that happen when we are at, and this isn't hard and fast rule, but it's sort of a general rule, when we are at specific ages. You know, like something happens at 5 years old, and it's, you know, whether or not it was a good or a bad thing, a traumatic thing, you know, a happy thing, whatever, it helps to set the basis of your personality, which is just still forming at those ages, you know, your traits. And in my case, and it happens at around 5. It happens again in child development at around 7. I think it's 3, 5, and 7, something like that. At any rate, when I was a kid, in the I don't remember if it was kindergarten or first grade, but I was, you know, I was the proverbial, and now I say it, proverbial child that was not chosen for kickball. You know, nobody wanted me on their team. Well, of course they didn't want me on their team. I was terrible at it. I was an awful athlete, and, you know, but that thought never occurred to me. What occurred to me was that it hurt. It hurt to be excluded, you know, to not be wanted on the team. And it is one of the pillars of my personality is that I am much more comfortable playing alone than I am playing on a team or a, you know, or a, I'm much more apt to sit in the corner silent than I am to, now this is a character flaw, and I try to work on it by being more ebullient, more, you know, stepping up and speaking up for myself. But that's something that I had to learn that I was doing. You know, that I would be okay with not being chosen. And so one of it also is one of the things that I learned at Landmark is that sometimes you just got to speak up, because otherwise nobody is going to notice you. So that is one of the base pillars of, you know, personality formation. The other one happened when I was about 5, and I had wanted a teddy bear for Santa to bring me a teddy bear for Christmas. And on Christmas morning, I went rushing out to the Christmas tree, and there was the most beautiful black furry teddy bear. It had big brown button eyes, and it was just so soft, and it was an amazing teddy bear, an absolutely amazing teddy bear that Santa brought me. And I went running into my mother's room, and I said, look what Santa brought, look what Santa brought. And my mother was a deep sleeper. And there was nothing wrong with that. She'd been up till, like 4 o'clock in the morning wrapping Christmas presents and putting them under the tree for me. And she reached out and she took a hold of the teddy bear and she rolled over and went back to sleep. And to this day, I don't share my toys with anybody. And that is such a selfish thing. But it took me a while to figure out that is where that it makes me physically uncomfortable to lend things to people. I will give it to you. I will absolutely give you anything I have. Do not ask me to lend it to you, because I can't do it. I just can't do it. I will give it to you, but I will not lend it to you. And that is really where that came from. So, with hopefully a laugh in mind, please, everybody, let's check out where we are. And, whoops, hang on. Done. And back out. Well, we haven't done very much, but we've had another story, and I've got another one in the can for you, and I will work on the next one and work on this a little more too. Until we meet again, everybody, please color something pretty. Please buy my books. I gotta eat. I have 8 of them now. This is the newest one. This is my author copy, which is why it says not for resale. I am also working on putting together a thing for a giveaway, so that this isn't so that things are not just coming in and not going out. Until we meet again, color something pretty. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.